Well, hi there. My name's Nat Young, and you're going to be watching the history of Australian surfing. This program was researched and written in 1983 and 84 in many places around Australia, from the archives in Canberra to all the different surf clubs in Sydney. And I feel really good and confident about this movie. Basically, it deals with the history of surfing as through a sort of, I suppose, someone's eyes who can go simply, what was Australia's fascination with the beach? Starting really way before the turn of the century, before surfboards came along in 1915 with Duke Manamoku, there was an Australian fascination with the beach. In fact, back to a guy called William Gosher, who broke the rules by going in the water for the first time, broke the law by going in the water for the first time here in 1908. So that's not really the essence of the story, that's just a part of the story. The essence of the story is the evolution of the surfboard from the longboard to the shortboard. Started in basically 1956 with the Queen's Surf Carnival held at Torquay Beach, associated with the '56 Olympics, and then came all the way up till 1985. We haven't really handled much after 1985 because, as we said, the movie was finished then. But the only really significant thing that's happened since then has been tow-in surfing on enormous waves, and that's another whole movie. So I hope you'll sit back and enjoy it, and it's as pleasant as it is for you to watch as it was for me to make. Thank you.
Yeah, I remember Nat Young and his surfing schoolmates. They used to come down to the beach in the old wagon with Murph the Surf painted all over it. They were a rowdy bunch. They started off in the surf club as gophers, you know, going for this and going for that. The buggers wouldn't do their patrol duty, though. When the waves were good, you couldn't keep them off the bloody boards. He's done all right for a surfie, though. These days, he owns a couple of surf shops, and not long back, he wrote a book on the history of surfing.
As a kid growing up in the 60s, and as one of the first professional surfers in the early 70s, surfing has always been the love of my life. Over the past 10 years, the history of surfing has become a complete obsession with me. And in this program, I'm going to present the history of Australian surfing. This is where it all started. It was the 15th of January, 1915, at Freshwater Beach on the north side of Sydney. A crowd gathered to watch the legendary Duke Manamoku create history by being the first person to ride a surfboard in Australia. The Duke had won a gold medal for the 100-yard sprint at the 1912 Olympic Games in Sweden. Directly after this memorable swim, the New South Wales Swimming Association invited him to come to Australia and demonstrate his winning form. Isabel Letham was a young girl of 15 at the time. She has the distinction of being Australia's first surfboard rider. Now, at 86, she looks back with fond memories of that day in 1915.
A beautiful summer's day with an enormous sea running. The grapevine had got very busy, and the headlands were lined with people. And Duke gave us a magnificent exhibition in the sea that nobody ever in their right mind would want to go out in. And we were absolutely bemused when he stood on his head. After being there for about an hour, Donald McIntyre came up to me and said, the Duke wants the girl to go out with him on the board. And I thought of this kid of 15 had never seen a surfboard in her life, or stood on one, was supposed to go out with the greatest surfboard rider in the world and ride tandem in this terrific sea. When we got onto the crest of this wave and I looked down into the trough, and I thought I was going over a cliff, I said, oh, no, no, I was scared stiff, and he pulled back on the wave. I did this 2 or 3 times, and he got sick of that. And the next time I did it, he said, "Oh, yes, yes, yes." And we got on this big wave and went right in. After that, I was right. I had no more trouble at all, and I was sailed on surfboard riding. But it did happen that at that juncture, I was the first woman to ride a surfboard in Australia.
Up until the Duke had shown Isabel how to ride a surfboard, Australians had had a rather protective and somewhat strange involvement with the ocean for recreation. In the latter part of the 19th century, Australia was still firmly entrenched in European custom. The horse-drawn bathing machine had been introduced to the colonies. Ours had a shark-proof net around it. Most people were content to promenade beside the sea. The men and women who pioneered open sea bathing had to do so before sunrise or after sunset. One surfer who goes back further than anyone and who knows this era like the back of his hand is Snowy McAllister.
Snow, can you tell us that story of Tommy Tanner and his involvement in Australian surfing?
Oh, yes, it was about 1890 when this kid came out from the islands. Actually, he came from the island of Tanner. Probably wouldn't know his mother and father, so they just called him Tommy Tanner. He was 16 years of age. So naturally, he went down the beach in the prescribed time. He could go down before 7 in the morning or after 6 at night. And Tommy Tanner was seen to be riding the waves in and flicking off them and going out and getting another wave, get another wave and ride in again. And when they saw Tommy Tanner doing this, they said, "We must get onto this," and he taught them how to body surf. And actually, the men that learned how to body surf were able to go around to different suburbs, and they went to Newcastle, they went to Wollongong, and they went to Bondi, and they gave demonstrations of just riding body surf, which is a remarkable thing today. Every kid is thrown in the water. He knows how to ride body surf, but they had to be demonstrated by our stalwarts. Freddie Williams was one of the chaps that did that.
As the number of bathers increased, the councils extended the hours to 8 a.m, a full extra hour. Attempts to police the time limit were difficult because it was so easy to dodge the constabulary. Then along came Gosha, full name William Henry Gosha, editor and owner of a local newspaper, the Manly and North Sydney News. Gosha used his newspaper to let everyone know that he was going to bathe at midday on the opening day of the surf season, the first Sunday in November 1902. He took his dip, but the authorities ignored him. The following weekend, he flaunted the law again. No reaction. But on his third attempt, he drew quite a crowd. He was escorted from the surf, but no charges were laid. Through his persistence, Gosha eventually won the right for Australians to bathe in the sea whenever they wanted to. In November 1903, Manly Council finally gave in and allowed all-day bathing. Similar moves took place at other beaches. As the popularity of bathing increased, so did the number of drownings. In that surf season, 17 people drowned at Manly Beach. It was obvious something would have to be done. Surf life-saving clubs were to develop into a unique Australian institution, but the beginnings were unpromising. A Surf Life-Saving Society was formed in 1894 and set up rescue equipment at the most popular Sydney beaches. Local surfers formed the Bondi Surf Bathers Life-Saving Club in 1906. The same summer, Manly Council appointed a paid lifeguard, but for some reason the idea didn't catch on. It was left to the surf life-saving clubs to take on the rescue work. The movement began to spread to other beaches, and eventually the Surf Life-Saving Association of Australia was formed. the lifesavers developed their own rescue methods, including the reel and belt technique, which has since been taken up all over the world. It wasn't long before women realized the potential of swimwear. Stores began to do a brisk trade in ladies' bathing costumes. Vogue magazine introduced beach fashions to their pages. By the mid-20s, an exciting new swimwear industry flourished. The beach belles of the period paraded in brightly coloured cloths of lighter weights and wearing the very latest fashions in bathing caps.
Snoke, you were the Australian champion in 1926. Can you tell us about those days?
Yes, they were keen surfing days of 1926, 27 and 28. I had the Australian title. Various clubs used to run competitions for surfboard riders. Mind you, they weren't that popular amongst the Surf Lifesaving Association, but we always managed to have a few events. And Newcastle was the big attraction. Always up there at their carnival in February, they had the biggest assembly of surfboard riders. Anything you won up there was considered to be almost a state title because the competition was so hot. Anyhow, during the exhibition that was on, it was a valuable exhibition. You had to go out whether there were sharks there or not because it was worth £3.10 in those days, and that was a very big trophy. We went out, it was about a dozen, I suppose, game enough to go out, the rest stayed on the beach. And you had to get your share of waves, just the same as you would today, and the judging was taken by the officials on the beach. So finally, I was thinking I was a little behind in the judging because I'd missed a few good waves and the other fellows had got them, and I thought, well, I've got to do something different this time. And this big wave came along and I got up on the head. The wave receded and left me standing on the head. Well, I could hear by the claps, and they had a big crowd in those days. They had tier seating and that sort of thing, and I could hear the cheering and the clapping of this marvellous ride that I did. But I stayed there, and the water receded some minutes when the judge came over to me and he pushed me down by the backside and he said, God, yeah, mate, you've won.
The Roaring Twenties, the hemlines went up, the mood was frivolous and carefree. Public transport and the automobile made the beach totally accessible. Everyone looked forward to the family's Sunday picnics at the beach. And of course, nothing could happen without a good cup of tea. Into the 30s, the beach was still a fun place to go. Ladies' costumes were more fashionable than ever before. Men started to bare their chests at the beach. Those pre-war years were very much a man's world. The surf clubs swelled to 10,000 members by the surf season of 1939-40. Even when the surfers went overseas to war, they didn't leave their sport behind them. Gus Staunton, MBE, head of the Surf Lifesaving Association of Australia.
But surf lifesaving is very much an Australian cultural heritage, if you can call it that way, that we seem to, wherever we go, we take surf lifesaving with us. That we had surf clubs formed through Africa, in Palestine and those places, in Tobruk and so on. Also in the Pacific, that we had many clubs that blossomed in the Solomon Islands and so on. It seemed that wherever people went, that if you could find a half a dozen surf club members, it didn't matter from what clubs back in Australia, they banded together and open up another surf club.
When the war ended in 1945, the barbed wire was removed from the beaches. This post-war compilation of newsreels shows how strong the surf club movement had become.
And on a summer's day, hundreds of thousands go down to the sea. To guard those who flounder in the search for thrills, there are 7,000 lifesavers, trained volunteer club members patrolling almost every beach in the country. Among them are some of the world's strongest swimmers, and their carnivals are a test of endurance, skill, and courage. This is the March Past, prelude to a day of thrills. No surf is too rough for them, no riptide too dangerous, no rips too great, if there's a life to be saved. If you don't think the men are glamorous, what about these surf nymphs? Hundreds of girls volunteered during the war when regular lifesavers were landing with Americans on less friendly beaches in the Pacific. Today, the girls add glamour, and when there's a life to be saved in a raging surf, well, they usually find too much competition from the men. But they look kinda cute, don't they? Of course, if the person being rescued had any choice, well, whose neck would you rather cling to? Boards and skis provide plenty of thrills. Lifesavers use them to patrol beyond the last line of breakers, ready to give shark warnings, or to rescue surfers who venture out too far and can't get back. But for the surfer, the board has only one use. It's the ultimate in riding the waves, a thrilling challenge to skill and nerve. But disaster strikes quickly. The boards hit him. Lifesavers on patrol have seen his signal for help, and they go into action. In reality, in a nasty sea. A beltman towing a strong white line dashes into the surf as linesmen make sure there are no tangles. The injured man, his shoulder broken, is brought ashore. Skilled hands render first aid. Speed, the speed that comes from alert, efficient training, has made another rescue. In a surf boat race, there's no prize but the satisfaction of being first home. It's training for rescue work, but boats strongly built as these are have been smashed to matchwood by dumpers like these. Giant waves that break sharply, tumbling down into an angry foam. A rudder would be useless in rough water, so sweep oarsmen keep the craft on their course. But if the waves take control, this can happen. But in spite of swampings, collisions, and near disaster, some boats manage to break through, hurtling towards the beach to be first home. It's more than a race. It's a trial of strength, a test, a preparation for another day when the prize is that of saving life. So they head for the beach together, fighting it out in a photo finish. Surfing's a national sport as the gods of water, waves, and sunshine conspire to give their worshippers thrills, thrills, and still more thrills.
Gus, why did the surf club membership decline in the mid-50s?
I think in retrospect, the association was finding its way again after the war, that it was re-establishing its role in the community and the need of it. You had the introduction of the Malibu board, and that there was a certain cycling off of members, I think, who just went board riding, who may otherwise have joined the association.
Well, Bluey, it's a shame it's really bad weather, but it's a terrible...
Bondi has always been home to Jack Bluey Mays. He was regarded as the finest surfboard rider in Australia in the mid-50s. What was it like then?
Well, Nat, it's basically the same as today, except we had longer boards and, you know, it was a period of toothpicks, as they called them, and it came to a point where this happened for about 20 years until such times as 1956, when the Americans brought the first small boards here, and from there on it's moved out into that position.
The Queen's Surf Carnival, held in conjunction with the 1956 Melbourne Olympic Games, saw the end of one era and the start of a new. The 16-foot hollow-hulled toothpicks were to ride their last waves. The Malibu had arrived.
Members of the Surf Life Saving Association in America and Honolulu are on a visit, sponsored by Ampol Australia Limited, who also help teams from South Africa, New Zealand and Ceylon to come to Australia. Another visitor for the International Carnivals was Duke Kahanamoku, Sheriff of Honolulu, former Olympic champion who introduced surfboard riding to Australia in 1915. The Duke smiles with delight as he meets a boy to whom he taught surfboard riding 40 years ago. At least Claude West was a boy then. He helped the Duke make the 90-pound board the Duke is holding. They made it in a timber yard from a log of sugar pine. Hawaiian Tom Schroeder tries the Duke's board and finds it's too heavy compared with the 22-pound balsa board he uses. Blonde Tommy Zahn, champion board rider of Hawaii, and then Greg Knoll, rise like sons of King Neptune on the same green Como.
Some 30 years later, Tom Zahn recalls that carnival in Torquay, Victoria, and the reaction to the revolutionary Malibus his team brought over.
When they first saw these little boards, they just tended to discount them or write them off, that we'd be just buried alive on such a small board out there in the surf. When we actually went out there and did what we did, we got a lot of notoriety and a lot of attention. The older surfers, for sure, they reacted unfavorably toward them. I think it appeared to be a disruption of their whole surfing style. We were lionized and adulated by these kids, and we were treated really wonderfully by everybody. We left some of our boards there. We just, rather than take them back, we just sold them off to the fellows down there, and they went on to replicate them with what materials they had available at that time.
As soon as the Americans departed, hundreds of younger surf club members tried to buy fiberglass Malibus.
But what was it like to really go from riding a 14 to 16 foot toothpick to riding a Malibu board?
When I first ever got on one of those boards, the feeling was just ecstasy. You know, you could feel the maneuverability of it. You could cut across the wave face without the board, you know, falling out, getting into a better position on the wave. You could suddenly maneuver it and turn it back, and suddenly a whole new era began, where I was used to sort of either just travelling at an angle across a wave or sort of hard cutting, as they used to call it. You know, the last of the hard cutters. You've heard the comment before. And in those days, you had to have a lot of balance. You know, they were very narrow, they were long, you had to bring them down the wave. The wave was as big as the board sometimes. This had to be, you know, precariously brought down the face of the wave, and then extremely good balance to stand up at the bottom of the wave with foam crashing all around you. And then when you got on something like this light balsa board, and that we didn't have at first, as you know, we made them hollow. It was easy. It was a piece of cake, you know. It was really nice. It just put a whole new dimension on surfing, of which I said to them. And as soon as fellas started to get a lender one and ride one, they were up to Gordon Woods's and just sign on the dotted line, you know, for a new board.
Gordon Woods was one of the first to take advantage of the Malibu boom.
Well, this is exactly the same as the board I bought from Bob Burnside in '56. Exactly the same. It's balsa. It's the same type of thing precisely. That was in late '56. Then we moved over to these sort of things. You've got to appreciate, in those years, Nat, there was no one surfing. There was a mere handful of fellows surfing. And we all wanted balsa. There just wasn't any balsa available. Fiberglass was in its infancy here, so we started to make these out of plywood. Now, these are plywood. There's a timber frame inside, little plywood cross pieces, and the whole thing is covered with ply. Notice the way it's shaped down at the back here, right, and up at the front, the same thing. But
and a little bit of fiberglass here to put the fin on, eh?
That's right. Well, that's a wooden fin. Once balsa became available, then we could do the things we wanted to do.
In 1959, more than 1,500 boards were produced. The introduction of the Malibu had created a new industry. The beauty of Sydney's North Shore, its uncrowded beaches, its inexpensive land prices, made the northern beaches a paradise for many of Sydney's surfers in the late 50s. One of these was Bob Evans. He was a keen Queenscliff Surf Club member who had gained his nickname Surge from his ability to ride through Surge Rock on Ferry Bower. He was completely entranced by the first Malibus, managing to buy one of the American originals. He helped organise early surfboard rallies, started Australia's first surfing magazine, and shot all this incredible footage of the late 50s, early 60s. Bob Cooper was one of the first American surfers to come down under.
I came to Australia in 1959 because I'd seen some movies, Bob Evans taken of Australia, and it showed some really incredible surf. And I thought, this place really has to be seen. There were guys over here surfing, showing a lot of energy, a lot of action, but they really didn't have a feel for it. At that stage, they were just really getting to foam, having a lot of problems with it, a lot of voids. Things were so bad that they had to color most of the boards. I got a chance to hang around with Midget and a few of the guys who were surfing locally and really appreciated the energy they were putting into their surfing. Their attitude was so different than the California attitude of flow with it. They were really trying and they were really working at their surfing. I realized that Midget Farrelly was this kid that I'd seen in a movie. And then when I got to see him in person, I was really amazed. I couldn't believe how far ahead he was of everybody else that I'd seen in Australia at that stage. I don't know where it came from, but he was probably 3 or 4 years ahead of anybody in Australia. And when I talked to him about it, he said, well, he just saw these pictures in magazines and tried to copy what was going on.
What was happening in Australia was precisely what had happened in California a few years earlier. Surfing had become a cult. The first skateboard craze hit. In September 1962, Bob Evans put out his first issue of Surfing World. Dave Jackman was taking on Australia's biggest waves and conquered the much-feared Queenscliff Bombora. The Atlantics had a smash hit with their number one, called Bombora. Soon, surf music took over the local charts. The Joy Boys recorded 6 surfing hits, and the Shantays and the Beach Boys invaded the record stores.
Here's a man who is renowned in right throughout the world as a fine exponent of classical ballet, and who this week in the newspapers claimed that he thought that surfing music was just as much an expression of art as was classical ballet. And for that reason, he has just recorded a brand new song called Surfer Doll. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Robert Helpman.
Introduce a bird doll, an underwater girl, a swinging little girl, who moved and shoot the curl. Figures that you double time. Oh, you say goodbye so sweet. I see you riding by with another guy, both in half the seat.
Barry Crocker recorded I Can't Do the Stomp. Who could ever forget Little Patty and my blonde-headed stompy-wompy real-gone surfer boy?
'Cause he's my blonde-headed stompy-wompy real-gone surfer boy. Yeah, 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 yeah. All the gang from the club will be surfing and stomping too. Riding their boards out on that sea of blue. While the summer sun is a-beating on down, I'll be stomping and surfing all around. Oh, with my blonde-headed stompy-wompy real-gone surfer boy. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Surf music and the stomp certainly captivated the youth of Australia. In the early 60s, you had to have blonde hair, baggy board shorts, and of course, a surfboard, even if you didn't get it wet. But it was the Malibu board which allowed Australia's new breed to shoot ahead in leaps and bounds. Midget Farrelly was Australia's best exponent of the hot dog style of surfing. Bob Cooper explains.
When I got to know Midget, we got to talking about things, and it was right after Dave Jackman had just ridden the Bombora, which made front pages all the way around Australia, and Jackman was part of the crew there at Bennett's. And I was really pleased to find out that they had decided to go to Hawaii and really have a look at it, because the raw talent was there. They figured Jackman would ride the big ones, and Midget would ride the little ones, and see what they could do to put Australia on the surfing map. And they really proved it.
Going overseas was a new experience for young surfers. So were Hawaii's massive waves, whose sheer power and size have always struck awe into every surfer. On the whole, the Hawaiian experience lived up to the team's expectations. As luck would have it, there was a lack of big waves for the 1962 Surfing Championships in Hawaii. Because of the small waves, the judges extended the time limit. All the contestants were fairly evenly placed. When the results were announced, Midget had won, the first Australian to take out a major international title. Midget's victory indicated that Australia had at last caught up with California and Hawaii in modern surfing. Midge returned to Australia as the accepted world champion. It got so heavy for him, he dyed his hair black to disguise his identity. He became the symbol of a new generation who are more interested in surfing than surf clubs. Patrol duty and training for the bronze medallion began to conflict with chasing waves, girls, and doing the stomp. The authorities looked on surfing with skepticism. The conflict between surf club members and surfboard riders was intensified by the introduction of a system which allotted sections of the beach to each group. Local councils had strong connections with the surf life-saving movement and forced board riders to register their boards and pay a fee. Lifesavers were instructed to police the system. Surfers who rode waves in the wrong area ran the risk of having their boards confiscated. This often led to a blue or two when riders refused to hand over their boards. There were also a few isolated brawls between surfies and the rockers, who were from the landlocked western suburbs. Publicity gave surfers a bad name. This became worse when two of Australia's finest surfers, Bob McTavish and David Chidgey, stowed away to Hawaii. With so much flack hitting the surfers, they decided to form their own association. In 1963, clubs purely for surfers were created all along the East Coast. They banded together to form the Australian Surf Riders Association. About this time, I was surfing down at Collaroy Beach on the north side of Sydney and getting into more trouble than I managed to keep out of. My mother bought my registration sticker for me. Like most surfers, I thought it was a bit of a rip-off. They were lazy days, hanging around the surf club on weekends, staying out in the water for hours, lying around in the warm sand watching the beach football and looking at the girls. A few friends and I formed the Collaroy Surfers Association. It had 17 paid-up members, and 10 hangers-on. There were girls too, looking beautiful and doing quite a bit of surfing now I come to think of it. I was busy peroxiding my hair to make it look as bleached as possible, tuning up on American slang, and trying to get as much time off school as possible to go up the coast with Bobby Evans.
Moving down the wall, now steady as she goes, you got your toes up on the nose, and now you're hanging by toes upon the Malibu. Let's stop!
This was a year of discovery in Australia, just as the 50s had been in California. Australian surfers were starting to head north and south from Sydney. They had realised the potential of Australia's waves. Victoria's Bells Beach had already been discovered by board riding members of the Torquay boat crew in 1961. Surf movies and magazines showed us what a good Malibu wave looked like. It didn't have to be big, just a clean swell breaking perpendicular around a point in order to give that perfect Malibu ride. We were just starting to listen to the easy beats as we traveled north looking for the perfect wave.
I woke up bright and early this morning. My little girl was not inside. I've been looking.
300 miles north of Sydney, off the coast of Kempsey, is Crescent Head. It was a real discovery. This is film of the first time non-locals surfed at Crescent Head. It gives some understanding of why it is so special. The entire shoreline, from the river mouth to the point, is lined with large, round river stones, which forms the basis for a consistent wave shape. On this first trip were all the stars of the day, Midget Farrelly and Rodney the Gopher Sumter. Waking up to a crystal clear winter's morning with a 4-foot glassy swell made this discovery the gateway to the north. We found plenty of rewards travelling up the coast every few weeks with Bob Evans. Chasing the wallabies and the emus off the rubbish dump track out of Yamba, we found our way to Angari.
Coming Tuesday, I feel better. Even my old man looks good.
It was another isolated perfect point break where we could develop our own individual styles. Kevin Platt, Bobby Brown, and myself were always along on these safaris up the coast in the early 60s. Bobby was a good mate. He was small in stature, which helped him fit neatly inside those little North Coast tubes. With arms outstretched artistically, he would tear along backlit crystal curls as though he was perpetually being filmed. Most of the time he was. Evans had the old camera grinding. The functional or stall style of surfing was very popular in the early 60s. Kevin Platt was one of the best at standing on the tail of his board and waiting for the curl to catch up. Often we would run into the nomadic Bob McTavish. He seemed to move constantly up and down the coast. He'd stop off at Angari to share a surf story around the fire and ride a few quality waves. These rhythmical little tubes of northern New South Wales and southern Queensland were to play an important part in the development of Australian surfing. It's hard to describe the beauty of the far north coast of New South Wales, the Byron Bay area in particular. It's unique and really has to be experienced to be appreciated. Green hills roll gently into the ocean, with a headland overlooking a wide, sweeping bay. From here, the most easterly point in Australia, you can look down over the great headland, where more often than not, the bay is filled with countless lines of swell. Frank Latter and Nipper Williams made many safaris to Byron Bay in this period, showing up at just the right time. On a good day at the paths, you could surf for over 300 meters on one wave, with schools of baby sharks and stingrays running from beneath your board. The scene of William Ghosh's historic plunge in 1902 was to play host to the world's finest surfers in 1964. Manly Beach in Sydney was to hold the first World Surfing Championship. Sponsorship was by Ampol Petroleum, whose national promotions manager, Terry Southwell-Keeley, was sweet-talked by Bob Evans.
At that stage, Ampol had a long history of sporting sponsorships throughout Australia, in every state, and in many, many branches of sport. But surfboard riding was then a comparatively new sport in Australia, and it was largely a disorganised sport. It became a craze with the kids. And then out of the blue, up turned Bob Evans in my office, and his idea was to promote the sport, to organise it properly. And he thought if we organised a surfboard championship or some surfboard event, it would lead to organising the sport properly within Australia. No one knew where all the surfboard riders came from. We had to find out throughout the world where surfboard riding had reached a stage that would make it possible to hold a world surfboard title.
The first official duty was to meet our civic leader. Surfers shake the hand of Deputy Lord Mayor Noble. Introductions were handled by famous Australian surfer Bernard Farrelly, British Isles champion Gordon Burgess, and surprise visitor from the USA, Mike Doyle, all mingle in friendly fashion. The strident notes of a stomp band herald the arrival of the crowd bent on pure enjoyment. Nearby, it's Everybody Stop. One of the most interesting events of the day is the women's finals. Queenslanders Phil O'Donnell and Tony Effort, Dorothy Leroy of New South Wales and Linda Benson from California put on their competition jackets and wax up before hitting the waves. Here, world champion surfer Mike Doyle, teaming with Linda Benson, show the crowds how exciting and beautiful tandem surfing can be.
It was new, and for that reason, it attracted more attention than it would nowadays. It attracted worldwide attention and also Australian-wide attention, so much so that we had about 63,000 people watching the events. Bear in mind that we'd brought from all corners of the world surfboard riders, and people were anxious to see how these newcomers from overseas would compare with our own Australian boys.
Doyle of the USA, and not forgetting Bobby Brown of Australia. It's on, the World Championship. No relaxing this time. In a duel of champions, the 1963 and 64 international stars Farrelly and Cabell meet up. Cabell again driving in the white water, stalls to miss a surfer. Outside, on a larger wave, Dooley slides alone. Bobby Brown and Dooley drop in together, but Dooley pulls out and leaves Brown the wave to himself. The kids on shore watch one of the USA's best surfing men, Mike Doyle, and note every degree of his technique. Midget seems happy on a small wave.
Midget won that first world contest, but he was getting a little bit aggressive. Unfortunately, the visiting surf stars didn't get to ride any of our big waves. Out on Manly Point, just a kilometre from where they were riding 3-footers, is one of our big wave spots. Easter '65 saw a gigantic south swell hit Ferry Bower. Only a handful of Sydney surfers were prepared to meet the challenge.
You're out the back. I race down to the shore break and start to paddle out. I only get out halfway when I hear somebody shout. I start to paddle harder, my arms are getting tired. I see a big one coming and then somebody
Palm Beach surfboat was smashed to matchwood on this wave, with many injuries sustained by both surfers and the boat crew. But this was not typical of 1965. Surfing was having fun on small waves, doing spinners, headstands, forming your own surfing club, and hanging out with your mates. The next World Championship was held at San Diego in 1966. California's David Nueva was considered the hot favorite. He was the state of the art with an incredible ability to stand on the nose in a stylish manner. The Australian team was a mixed bag. Peter Druin, the hot young Queenslander, myself and an older midget Farrelly. Farrelly was still fighting back after being dethroned by a new approach that was coming on in the mid-60s. I won the '66 World Championship as vanguard for the new era. I was influenced by two surfers, Bob McTavish and an expatriate Californian kneeboarder, George Greenough. The board I was riding was radically different, only 9 foot 4 inches long. It was 2 feet smaller than those ridden by the Yanks in that same period. My approach to riding a wave had developed from the old style. I was going for more blatant direction changes and more radical maneuvers closer to the curl than had previously been attempted. Noosa heads provided a very solid foundation to experiment with board design. We had consistent quality surf, where one wave was almost a carbon copy of the one before it. Recently, Bob McTavish, George Greenough and myself got together to rave about those days and the dramatic changes in board design that took place.
Now, it's funny being here, Bob and George, because there's been so much stuff written and talked about all that plastic machine and the first shortboard. But really, you know, where did that idea first come from, Bobby?
Well, as you know, all surfing on big boards, or Malibus, you turn from the back, then walk forward to get speed. And one day I saw George surfing for the first time at Maroochydore Beach, and he was turning and getting speed off the tail of his board. The speed and the turning were locked in the one point of the board. And I said, well, that's what we've got to do, because it gives you a much greater option, more power out of the turn and a choice of lines when you come out of the turn.
So that gave you the idea to actually make them shorter?
Oh, yeah, but it wasn't just me, Nat. It was a lot of help and a lot of input. Well, of course, George, from the design viewpoint, and you're the guy that got out there and ripped on them. You were the guy that made shortboard surfing established, or you made it the surfing.
That was around 1965, wasn't it, Bob? That was my first extended stay with you and George and the rest of the crew up around the Noosa area.
Yeah, that was when it all started, Nat. That was George's second visit. What a classic, you know, picking up George at the airport. Gets off the plane barefoot, sleeping bag stuffed full of a little flexible spoon, bunch of fins in there, some tools, some fishing gear. And he picks up the conversation that you were halfway through when he got on the plane 6 months before. He's a gem.
So, George, what gave you the idea to come to Australia in the first place?
Well, there's going to be a lot of action over here. The fishing was good and the surf was good. I'd met a lot of Australians in the States.
But then again, you kept coming back.
Well, and I had a lot of friends over here then after I left the first time. And I had a good time here, so I came back again. I was working as a fisherman in the States for 6 months out of the year, so it was an ideal situation to come over here.
But why did you have problems on your kneeboard when you were surfing the same waves as us?
I've got to follow the fall line or the energy line in the wave a lot closer than what you have, and basically, I've got to run the thing wide open all the time. I can't it's hard to choke it back to half throttle, because it doesn't have the area, it doesn't float, and it doesn't have the planing area. That when you're on your bigger board, you can just kind of cruise along and stall it. You can't really stall a spoon.
Did you ever surf a full-size board?
I tried a 6-foot surfboard for a while. I learned I was quite good on that, and then people said, well, you should get rid of your beginner's model and get a regular one. So I got a 9'2", rode it 3 times and gave it away. That was the last time I rode a surfboard. You know, I catch a lot of fish, and I, you know, feel the fins, feel the foil, and look at them. You know, my feeling about it then is the same as today, that it basically the board should flux and conform to fit the curve of the wave.
We were suddenly given a huge amount of new input which we had to digest. We tried to make the most of it, and in some ways we went to the extreme, making some horrible boards based on Greeno's principles. But we learnt a lot too.
What sticks in your mind, Bobby?
Well, for a start, George. And then around the corner, Midget was sawing off 4 inches off the nose of the board, and I'd saw off 6. To me, the most exciting time was in the middle of '67, when we were carving 4 inches, 6 inches off our boards day by day. In a period of a month, they came from 9'3" down to 8 feet, and then rapidly after that, they went down to 7 feet. That was the most exciting time because we started to feel that our turning and speed were being locked into the one area back in the tail. We'd broken away from the straight line. We were carving for the first time.
We had a lot of fun in those days. There was a trip up to Double Island Point. Greeno and McTavish had checked it from the air. Driving along the beach, walking over the point, it was pretty discouraging to find the waves were only 2 feet. Still, that's the story of most safaris. We didn't get too many waves, but we had lots of laughs.
I'll sing my song and I'll be gone. Someday I'll have money. Money isn't easy. Loving isn't easy. Neither up to me.
One of the attractions of going to the beach has always been the girls. In 1968, they were the center of a controversy sparked by the latest style bikinis. Local councils frowned upon them. In their eyes, they were too brief. Beach inspectors at Bondi were instructed to move any girl off the beach if the bottom half of a bikini did not measure up to the required 3 fingers width. In 1970, the councils had all but given up their battle to control the so-called standards of decency. Beach inspectors hung up their tape measures and returned to the job of saving lives. Meanwhile, a long way from Bondi, other young Australians were fighting a more serious battle. Australia's presence in Vietnam was being deeply felt by parents with 20-year-old sons. The ranks of Australia's defence forces were mainly filled through conscription. Pulling names out of a barrel determined that 1 in 3 would put on a uniform and go to war. There were some waves in Vietnam, but too many of our surfing sons got to ride their last wave on foreign shores. A moratorium march in September 1970 was one of the many acts of protest over Australia's involvement. Draft cards were burned. Conscription was to continue for another 2 years until it was abolished by a new government led by Gough Whitlam. This was the era of social conscience. Following public protests that same year, sand mining companies were stopped from mining minerals on north coast beaches around Angari and the Myall Lakes. Anything that affects beaches affects surfers. They followed keenly the mining issue in a new monthly newspaper called Tracks. It was launched specifically to give surfers a voice on matters which affected them. The star of Tracks was underground cult hero Captain Good Vibes.
What a pity I'm feeling so full of aggro.
Introduced in 1972, he helped Aussie surfers laugh at themselves.
Oh my God! A head-on with a garlic prawn! Screw! I hope I'm not a laxative in me next life! Full bar! Through the back door!
Naturally, the newspaper covered the developments in the sport. The shortboard was the topic of the day. In 1970, the average length of the surfboard was under 6 feet. Shortboards were more maneuverable. Their large single fins allowed us to turn hard and at the same time ride tighter in the curl. Shortboards had their bad points too. They lacked the momentum to coast over flat parts of the wave. It was because of this that Australian surfers, favoured to win the 1970 World Championship in Victoria, missed out. Californian Rolf Arnez won easily on a 7-foot Hawaiian-style board, more suited to the conditions. After this unexpected win, we realised that no one board was ideal for all conditions. In the chase for even more manoeuvrability, the twin fin concept was adapted to the short board. Many surfers felt this was purely a move by surfboard manufacturers to boost the slump in their industry in the summer of 1969-70. Within 12 months, the twin fin idea died. In time, however, it would be revived to make a sensational comeback. The search for the perfect surfboard continued. Australian surfers looked to Hawaii for direction. The Hawaiians were on a speed trip, but of course they had the waves. They were using pocket rockets. These long, spear-like boards were ideal for Hawaii, but not for normal Australian conditions.
How I love those nibbin country sailors.
Kids began to do their own thing. They built their own boards in the backyard. They dropped out. They went back to nature. Nimbin was reality. Country soul was the happening.
How I love those nibbin country sailors. Goddesses in three-part harmony, in harmony, in harmony. Far away from the noise and the wheeler dealers. Stone the crows, it's nimbin girls. Stone the crows, it's nimbin girls. Stone the crows, it's nimbin girls for me.
I was building boards on the farm in Byron Bay. I believe the Vietnam War was responsible for the revolution by youth in the early 70s. It seemed perfectly natural to rebel against the old values that sent us off to kill people. In retrospect, my hippie period was a strange mixture of contradictions. We considered our karma. We questioned the value of surfing contests. Surfing, we said, was an art form, not just a sport.
I may not know art, but I know what I like.
Real-life underground cult hero was Wayne Lynch from Victoria, whose talent was first recognised by wetsuit baron Doug Warbrick.
Wayne really was a freak talent. I first met him in the early 60s when I went surfing at Lawn one day when there's a heavy southerly wind. And there's this very little kid out there, and I found he could do all the in vogue moves in surfing at that time. could turn the board forehand and backhand and walk to the nose and ride the nose in both directions. So I got to talking to him because there's only 3 or 4 surfers around at the time, and found out he was only 11 years old, and he told me he'd only been surfing for 2 weeks. And I thought this couldn't be possible, that he could ride the nose and turn and all this stuff after a couple of weeks surfing, but I later found it was true. A little bit later, when he's still in his mid-teens, he virtually got adopted by yourself and Bob McTavish, George Greeno and that group, and had a lot of influence on his surfing. And I remember that after he'd been surfing with you guys, he'd practiced the moves that he'd seen, say, yourself doing, and he picked them up so quickly it'd be remarkable. They said he liberated the goofy foots, and I believe that's probably true. He had a more powerful backhand attack than any other surfers at that time. By the time he was 18 years old, he'd virtually given up competition, even though in bits and pieces he had great success as a professional.
This final of the '78 surfer bout between Lynch and Sydney rookie Larry Blair was really interesting. The contest was held at North Stain in what was almost perfect 6 to 8 feet barreling lefts. Blair managed to edge out Lynch by getting this flawless tube just when the judges would have had them neck and neck. They were certainly the finest waves ever seen for a surfing contest in Sydney. But I am starting to get a little bit ahead of my story. The early '70s saw some interesting changes. Belly boards became known as knee boards, but they were exactly the same. Shorter and lighter surfboards attracted more girls to the sport. Also, the leg rope was born. Skateboards of a more sophisticated design rolled back into fashion. Flared jeans were in. And the best surf movie of the day was The Morning of the Earth.
The forces of the universe and the elements of space conjured up your being, your size, your time, your shape. You were created with all the beauty they could call, and earth, you surely are the measure of them all. Your rocks all turn to gold and your tiny stones to jewels. And when you swirled and mists had cleared, you stood so pure.
The Morning of the Earth captured the feelings of the period with an emphasis on the alternative lifestyles, the taking of psychedelic drugs, and letting tomorrow's problems take care of themselves. It was an approach to life that appealed to nearly every surfer, including the talented Keith Paul. It was difficult for Keith to give up this laid-back existence, and he would not figure in surfing's next development.
It was the morning of the earth.
While most Aussie surfers were into flower power, country soul and the euphoria of riding the waves, a brigade of younger surfers totally committed themselves to competition. Narrabeen in Sydney was the centre of this new thrust. Terry Fitzgerald was the driving force.
That late 60s, you know, it was all escape, get away, who wants to be regimented, Vietnam, all that stuff. So it was really easy to go surfing because essentially you were just getting away from what everybody wanted to do to your head or your brain or your body in Vietnam. That escape formula that grew in the late 60s was the cause of the surfing revolution in the early 70s. We supplemented the competitive arena with the club and used club contests every month or inter-club contests bi-monthly. And we just took on a competitive, like all those guys, Grant Oliver, Mark Warren, young Simon, Cole Smith. It was a situation of, we're 18, 19, 20, 21. Our egos had to build each other about a bit, so we did it with club contests.
This really paid off. The Narrabeen boys made up the majority of the Australian team for the '72 World Contest in California. Doug Warbrick went to San Diego as a judge.
And on the way back, I spent a bit of time in Hawaii and saw the first fully blown pro events. I thought that was a great idea. In Easter '73, which was a couple of months after the events in Hawaii, we saddled up with the first fully blown pro event in Australia.
Bells Beach in Victoria proved to be the perfect venue. The Easter weekend guaranteed good crowds from Melbourne who had ready-made vantage points. Sponsors were not hard to find. Many top surfers were already being supplied with boards and a few dollars. The manufacturing companies were now getting keen to align themselves with the stars. Professional surfing was catching on. Michael Peterson from Queensland's Gold Coast won the Bells Beach contest. He literally burst on the scene. During 1973, 74 and 75, he won every major event he entered.
Come and see the real thing, come and see. I am the real thing.
Although Peterson didn't go to Hawaii that year, most of Australia's hot young surfers did. Ever since the early 60s, Australian surfers made the pilgrimage to Hawaii to ride the biggest waves in the world. The 1976 Smirnoff Pro-Am was a memorable contest. It was battled out in 25-foot waves. When the results were announced, Australians Mark Richards, Ian Cairns and Rabbit Bartholomew were placed first, second and third, respectively. Cairns, who remembers this wave only too well, was determined to make a career out of professional surfing. Originally from Perth, he spent most of his time travelling. It was Cairns, his close friend Peter Townend, and another talented surfer, Mark Warren, who formed a promotional team that would go in search of fame and fortune. They called themselves the Bronzed Aussies.
It works out really good, like we really encourage each other and support each other, and we're in there wanting one of us to win, because as a team, if one wins an event, well, it's beneficial to the three of us. And that's one of the main reasons we formed the Bronzed Aussies.
This was a difficult time for the new breed of so-called professional surfers. All they could expect to receive for their performances was an airfare and expenses. What was obviously needed were bigger cash prizes and a change in the judging system. Such moves would make the sport more professional and more appealing to the public. One Australian did just that, single-handedly. Peter Druin was the oldest pro surfer on the circuit in the mid-70s. Druin, who hails from the Gold Coast, learned his surfing in that unique area which has been a surfer's paradise for 30 years. The numerous headlands there include 3 of the finest point breaks in the world: Greenmount, Kira, and Burleigh Heads. Every year, between December and April, cyclonic conditions create quality waves. Armed with this local knowledge, Druin set about staging a contest. He persuaded a large Queensland sportswear company to sponsor the 1977 Stubbies at Burleigh Heads. The world's biggest surfing prizes were up for grabs. Druin also introduced his man-on-man judging concept. This method became generally accepted and is still with us today. As its very name suggested, man-on-man allowed only 2 men in the surf at any one time. Druin's system revolutionized surfing contests, and over the years it has been developed to a point where 5 judges score each ride from 1 to 10. The judges look for the most radical maneuvers in the most critical sections of the biggest waves and for the longest distance. Stylish re-entries like this scored particularly high with the judges. Radical cutbacks scored well too. Like most surfers of the day, Newcastle boy Mark Richards welcomed the new system.
Well, the advantages of the man-on-man system over the old system of 4 and 6 guys in the water were the fact that it gave the surfers a lot more scope to work on their performances in the water. You could really concentrate on what waves you wanted to pick. And a lot of times you were in the lineup by yourself and there was a set of waves coming through and you could take any wave you liked and you could really sort of work on your performance. Whereas in the old system, when there were 4 and 6 guys in the water, you'd see a wave coming and there'd be guys paddling over the top of you or guys hustling you for that wave. And I think it was also a lot better for the spectators because that contest had a huge spectator crowd. And when there's only 2 guys in the water, you can see one guy getting on top of the other guy. When there's 4 or 6 people in the water, the spectators have got no idea what's going on whatsoever.
On his home territory at Burleigh, Michael Peterson stepped back into the competitive arena to win the first Stubbies decisively. Along with every other surfer in 1977, Peterson was surfing a single-fin board. Quietly, however, Mark Richards had been experimenting with twin fins.
We had one fin. What was wrong with one fin? Why 2?
Well, the problem with one fin was that the fin is very big on a single fin surfboard and it acts like a rudder in the middle of the board. And it's very hard to turn. And the advantage of the twin fin surfboard over the single fin is you can have a much wider tail, which gives you more manoeuvrability and more speed, and it's easier to turn. With a little fin on each corner, it makes it very easy to turn, and it gives you tremendous speed and manoeuvrability, which you couldn't get out of a single fin surfboard. Reno Abalira was out here in 1976 and he had a twin fin surfboard with him, and it was a very wide stubby one, and it was very similar to the wide stubby twin fins of the 1970 era.
And at that stage, I was having a lot of problems on single fins because of the narrowness in the tail. I couldn't get the flotation, the speed, and the manoeuvrability that I needed to compete in the international surfing tournaments. So I had to talk to Reno about it, and he gave me some dimensions of his board, and I made one, and it was a very fat sort of round one. It was a rather ugly looking thing. And that went very well, and I thought, gee, if it goes okay like that, why not update the shape to sort of a modern style of surfboard with a narrow nose and a pointy nose and sort of a swallowtail. So I'd been working on the design for about 8 to 10 months, and I felt I had them at a stage where I had the design right and I had the confidence in them to take them on the circuit.
Destined to become world champion, Mark Richards' greatest rival in 1978 was Wayne Bartholomew, better known as Rabbit.
I love competing against Rabbit because he's one of the best surfers to compete against. You know, he's a fantastic surfer. And Rabbit's one guy that really works on his competitive strategy. You know when you go out there that you've got a real battle on your hands. So anytime you surf against bugs, it's really a challenge and something to look forward to. Actually, 78 was really Rabbit's year. Rabbit was a world champion that year. And he virtually, I think he led the world circuit from the start. He won the Stubbies event at the beginning of the year at Burleigh Heads. And he cleaned me up in the semi-finals of that one. But I managed to get him back at the Bells Beach event a month later. But he virtually went on to dominate that year and win the world title that year. It was a great year for him.
Rav, I wondered if you could reflect on that whole 78 final with MR and just the conditions and that whole time, because it was a pretty monumental stage in surfing.
Yeah, it was actually, because I was just coming off, I just defeated him in the Stubbies, and I was ranked number 1. I came to Bells and we fought our way through the final, and just prior to going out, I realised how important it was. It was a monumental final, and that was a time when MR was really ushering in his twin fin assault.
Surf for the final was, I think it was about 6 to 8 feet. You know, a little bit onshore, very hard to get out, but there were some 6 to 8 foot sets. And I remember we had this full-on hustle for the first wave, and I managed to steal the first wave from him, which was only a small one. And then when I was paddling back out, a huge set came through, and Rabbit missed it, and I caught the tail end of one. And then when I was paddling back out, I think I had 2 waves before it even caught a wave. And it was only a 45-minute final, and it was 6 waves, and I think they counted the best 3. So I got off to a really good start, so it was real pleasant memories on that one.
So how did it feel to be world champion?
Well, it felt great because, I did lead from the first event to the last, and even the great MR hasn't done that. So that year was mine, absolutely.
It may have been Rabbit's year, but Mark Richards had used the time constructively to perfect the twin fin, which was to help him win 4 consecutive world titles from 1979 through to 1982. The twin fin paved the way for the introduction of multi-fin boards. Out of this experimentation during 1979, Simon Anderson developed the 3-fin thruster, which is now the world's most popular surfboard. But it doesn't end there. In the 1984 Bells Beach contest, Mark Richards, who has always been at the forefront of board development, derived a fresh burst of energy from 4 fins. Also competing in the 1984 Bells contest was Sydney surfer Shane Horan. His board was more radical. Inspired by Australia's incredible success in winning the America's Cup, he turned to the designer of Australia 2 for guidance.
Yeah, Ben Lexon designed it for me. He used to be a surfer himself. He said I should try one of these in my board, and I tried it, and it works really well. A lot of drive, and I can continually hold the power on the fin.
This year's Bells Beach contest included a Malibu event. The Mal's tremendous popularity has seen the surfing industry change from building only short, sophisticated, multi-fin boards to accurate replicas of the 60s. The 80s saw a revival of interest in the Malibu. It was mainly being surfed for fun, But some pretty heavy competition developed, with healthy cash prizes being offered for the best execution of all the old manoeuvres of the 50s and 60s. From hanging five to the coffin ride, thousands of older surfers are reliving their childhood. Even the kids are getting into it. The 8 to 9 foot long planks provide a change from serious surfing on the refined short boards of today. Girls surfing has really come a long way. Over the past 10 years, their style has developed more than any other group, to the point where they are no longer an embarrassment in competitive surfing. While it is true that girls have always enjoyed riding the waves, in the past it was just for a laugh on a hot summer's day that usually ended up with suntan oil all over your board. These days it's really interesting to watch the girls do battle in professional competition. Some girls now surf as well as the boys. Kim Merrig from California and Australia's Pam Burridge are fine examples of female surfing talent. It's becoming more and more apparent that the sex of the surfer is not necessarily a handicap. What is important is that the girls are enjoying their surfing and are as competitive as the boys.
Shane has taken out the first set. Tom Carroll wants to fight back. Any second now. So set 2 in the grand final of the Rip Curl Australian Crawl Surfing Festival. We're putting on an Australian crawl tape. Fabulous to have them sponsoring the event. From Sydney, New South Wales, to be the new world champ. Powering through on his backhand, past the water photographers. Long ride, slashing off the top, manoeuvring off the bottom. Another beautiful wave here at Little Rincon. Back to the wall, carving manoeuvres, driving down the fast-feeling wall and manoeuvring up and down at the same time. Dig off the bottom, he nearly got the photographer. Backing into the tube and slashing off the top. Tom Carroll fighting back here. Shane Horan up and riding in white. So a very good exchange by the two surfers. Great exchange. We'll give you the scores soon. Tommy's not just looking, he's up and riding in red. Tommy Carroll, an absolute screamer at Little Rincon Bells. Nice, clean, workable face. Screaming offshore winds. Tommy's putting in lots of manoeuvres. His opponent's up now. Shane Horan up in white. Tom Carroll all the way through. All the way through into the shore break section. These big backhand manoeuvres. Then outside. Shane in the white, making his big forehand manoeuvre. Huge bash in the shore break for Tom, and Shane's making it all the way through. Two incredible rides here. Shane's still going. Standing in the tube in the shore break. And out the back.
The 1984 Bells contest was the final event in a grueling year of competition. It saw competitors living out of suitcases and chasing points on a circuit which took them to Europe, Israel, South Africa, Japan, and the USA.
And the winner, winning $6,800, Shane Horan. New South Wales, Australia.
Shane Horan won the Bells, but over the year, it was Tom Carroll who accumulated the most points. At a black tie event in Sydney, we gathered to officially present him with the top award.
Well, I'd like to congratulate Tom on a fantastic effort this year. I'd like to wish him every success in the future, except when we're surfing in a heat together. And from the TV shows I've seen Tom doing lately, I'm sure he's going to make a fantastic ambassador for our sport. The new world champion, Tom Carroll.
I'm just so proud to follow in the footsteps of this man here, Mark Richards. Thank you very much, ASP, and every surfer on the circuit for being great competition. Thank you very much.
Tom Carroll, ladies and gentlemen, the 1983-84 World Surfing Champion. He's come through a lot of tough times to get there too.
Tommy knows as well as I do that you're not champion forever. Someone new and exciting is always coming up through the professional ranks, hungry for the rewards that go with it. But surfing is more than just money. Today it's accepted as mainstream sport. It's influenced our culture, fashion, music, even our attitude to the environment. And you can be sure that whenever there are good waves, there'll be thousands surfing just for fun. I think surfing buff Barry Humphries summed it up with this little ditty.
I've never chuckled so much in all my life as I did that night last summer. Oh, it was king, man. There's no doubt about it. You cannot beat the great Australian outdoor life. Oh, I was down by Manly Pier, drinking tubes of ice-cold beer with a bucket full of prawns upon me knee. But when I'd swallowed the last prawn, I had a technicolor yawn, and I chunned it in the old Pacific Sea. Drink it up, crack another dozen tubes and prawns with me. If you want to throw your voice, mate, you won't have any choice but to chunder in the old Pacific Sea. I've had liquid laughs in bars, and I've hurled from moving cars, and I've chuckled when and where it suited me. But if I could choose a spot to regurgitate me lot, then I'd chunder in the old Pacific Sea. Come on, drink it up, chuckle it, crack another dozen tubes and prawns with me. If you want to throw your voice, mate, you won't have any choice but to chunder in the old Pacific Sea. Excuse me.